Hi, my name is Aisha. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be sharing all of the books and essays that I read in January because you know the mantra on this channel is that we have to fight the brain rot, right? But first, tea. So I got my tea. So in January, I read 10 books, which is insane. Also, if you see me looking down from the camera, it's because I have my story graph opened on my iPad and I'll be reading from it. The first book that I read in January is The White Book by Kang, translated by Deborah Smith. And as we all know, Kang won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2024. So after she won the prize, I vowed to myself that I was going to read all of her works that have been translated into English in 2025. The White Book is a work of meditation on the color white. Literally, white. Kang was inspired to write this book by our older sister that died when she was just about a few hours old. If I were to describe this book with one word, I would say the word jazz. It felt like I was listening to a sad but healing jazz song. I was also quite fascinated by how far she went to look for the color white in mundane, everyday things in our surroundings. For example, the color of rice is white. The color of the apartment that she stayed in when she was doing her writer's residency, which kind of led to this book, was also white. And one of the most fascinating things that she described as white was the fact that morning dew paints things in the surrounding as white. You know, when you go out in the morning, the dew from, like, I guess the night, if you look at it closely, like, plants kind of look whitish because of it. I sort of enjoyed this book. I thought it was a decent introduction into the writing of Kang, into how she writes. I found it lyrical and I gave it 3.5 stars, I think. The next book that I read in January is Jog On, How Running Saved My Life by Mackie. This is a non-fiction where Mackie highlights how she started running and how it basically like saved her from the mental health struggles that she has. And if you don't know already, I am a runner. I have been running for, I think I first started running in 2020, but it became more like religious in 2022. So I started running a lot more religiously in 2022. I gravitated towards this book because whenever I run, I feel like whatever problem is on my mind or whatever mode that I'm in that I don't exactly like, whenever I go running and come back from it, I feel a lot more refreshed. I wanted to see if there are other people that have like connected with running on a deeper level. And obviously, like, scientifically, any exercise gives you like dopamine, but I wanted to see how she would describe what running does for her. So I remember one time in 2022 I got a very bad news. I woke up that morning and I just wore my running shoe and I went on a very long run. I just started running, and by the time I got back, I had a lot more clarity and it didn't feel like my world was about to end. So I gave this book 3.75 stars because at some point it felt a bit repetitive, but I also enjoyed the facts that she shared in the book. I like how she puts into consideration the way that being a minority can affect your ability to engage in physical activity. So yeah, it was quite informative, and it was also validating to see that there are people that stay sane by running. The next book that I read in January is a graphic novel called Naked City by Drooker. This graphic novel follows one main character. She's a singer and she basically hitchhikes from a local, like, I don't know, city where she grew up to New York to find success. Obviously, New York is a city of lies. Everybody's hustling. Reminds me of Lagos. And she was kind of looking for jobs to make ends meet because all of the side gigs that she was doing wasn't really paying her. So she stumbled on an ad that a painter puts up because he wants to move from painting landscape to painting nude portraits. And so she signed up and started posing for this painter nude. And basically through their journey, they both learn a bunch of stuff about art, what it meant for them, what success meant for them, and what fame can cost sometimes. So first of all, I gave this book 3.5 stars. I didn't dislike reading it, obviously, because I gave it 3.5 stars, but I didn't exactly love it. It just felt like being thrust into the lives of these people, the singer and the painter and other characters around them, and just watching them make decisions, just being there and just experiencing their lives. And if you like reading books that are number one, character driven, number two, graphical, and number three, books that explore like the deeper meaning of life and art in general, I think you would enjoy this one particularly. So the next book that I read in January is called A Midlife Baby by J. Hansson. So this is the second book in the Midlife trilogy, and for more context, the trilogy follows three women in their 50s, Ellen, Carol, and Kay, and they've been friends since when they were in uni, so like late teens, early 20s. The trilogy just basically follows them navigating life in this new era. So everything ranging from menopause, navigating marriage life, motherhood, career, and most importantly, their friendship. Their friendship is at the center of all of the books. This second one, A Midlife Baby, is a continuation of the first one. So in the first book, they went on a trip to Cyprus to try and rekindle their friendship. I would say if you're on the lookout for older characters, or like characters that are not exactly in their 20s or 30s, like older characters, but specifically older female characters, you should definitely try out this trilogy. So I gave it 4 stars because it was just a seamless continuation to the first book. It didn't feel like I was missing anything, and I enjoy experiencing this woman's life. Like, I enjoy seeing what they're going through, seeing their lives, seeing like their everyday life. I do think that they need to work better on their friendship, so I hope in the third book this is something that they are going to focus on specifically. The next book that I read in January is Hello Beautiful by Napolitano. So first of all, I gave this book 3.75 stars, and it's mostly because of my emotions, right? Mostly because of my emotions. But I would say up front that this book is a brilliant book club book. Like, it's a brilliant book in the kind of emotions that it puts you through, the kind of questions that it forces you to ask, and the kind of introspection that it forces you to do as well. So let me tell you what this book is about. So this book starts off with a character called William Walters. So William Walters was born to 2 individuals that have just lost their first child, and so he grew up in the backdrop of his elder sister's death. And just imagine all of the trauma that he has had to go through. Let's just start with that one. Fast forward into the story, we follow 4 sisters from a family called the Padavano family. I think that's what they are called. Julia, Sylvie, Selena, and Emmeline. So Julia is the first child, Sylvie is second born, and Celine and Emmeline are twins. So Julia goes to the same university that William goes to, and they met and basically fell in love, and that is how William came to have a connection with the Padavano family. So something really dramatic happened to the Padavano family members, and it cascades a series of dramatic and messy, crazy things that later happened to them. And so this book is a story of family issues, sisterhood, how complicated love can be, and also how selfish human being can be. First of all, firstborn daughter syndrome is a bad thing. Like, if you're a firstborn daughter, make sure that you fight that syndrome with every single thing in your body. Secondly, good girl no dey pay. See, don't do good girl for anybody, especially if you, I don't know, get married and the father of your child decides that they want to leave or something. Don't be doing I want to protect my child from the trauma, blah blah blah. Tell that child the evil that their father has done. Don't do good girl. I think it's a good book just based off of the kind of emotions that this writer evokes, like the kind of emotions that our writing evokes. I only gave it 3.75 stars to be petty because there are some characters in this book that I just dislike. They just made me so angry. But yeah, it's a good book. I won't lie, it's a good book. Editing Aisha here. So it was while I was editing this video that I realized that I didn't talk about one other book that I read in January, and the book is titled This Letters End in Tears by Musih, Tedji, Xavier. So this book is set in Cameroon and it follows two characters, Bessem and Fatima. So it is an epistolatory novel, basically a novel told in letters. We follow Bessem writing letters to a lover from 13 years ago, Fatima. So Bessem and Fatima were lovers when they were in uni, and something really traumatic and violent happened to them and they lost contact. So 13 years in the future, Bessem is trying to find Fatima, and so she's writing letters to her, telling her about her worries, her emotions, reminiscing about their relationship from when they were younger, and also just like narrating her experiences as a queer woman in the future in Cameroon. So naturally, we see the experiences of queer people in Cameroon. One thing that really shocked me about this book is the level of violence, like the extent of the violence that queer people experience. Obviously, Cameroon shares a border with Nigeria, and so I imagine that our cultures are fairly similar across board. And I know that queer people experience violence in Nigeria, but the way that the violence was described in this book, it shocked me like even more. Like the violence was crazy. For me, it's unimaginable, but clearly it's not because people are experiencing it. I really appreciate this book for opening my eyes to that experience, that extent of violence. I enjoyed how she carried us through Bessem's emotions. Also finding out about Fatima. You kind of have a sense of what has happened to Fatima at the beginning of the book. This was a good book in how well it portrays the experiences of queer people in Cameroon, and I gave it 4 stars. The next book I read is Days at the Morisaki Bookshop by Satoshi Yagisawa, translated by Eric Ozawa. So this I actually read for January in Japan. I generally don't read Japanese literature for some reason. So I just decided that, okay, let's do a January in Japan pick. And I chose this one because I felt like the central theme would be about books, and it is about books. This book follows a character, what's her name again? Takako. She's a 25-year-old woman that has just gone through a devastating heartbreak, and she goes to live with her uncle that manages a second-hand bookstore somewhere in Japan. I can't remember the name of the area, but the district is basically a district where there are lots of second-hand bookshops. I feel like this is what drew me to this book, the fact that it's about a bookshop, but a second-hand bookshop. Bookshops are like cool, right? But there's something cooler about second-hand bookshops. The central theme is about books, but it's also how books can heal people. And it's even more interesting because we saw in real time how Takako became a reader, like how she became a voracious reader. This book has a sequel, which I am waiting in line to read in my library. So yeah, I gave this book 4 stars. We have 3 books left, so I'm just going to rush through. So the next book that I read is The Asiri, Volume 1 by Roye Okupe. This is also a graphic novel. The Asiri is a speculative, like fictional graphic novel. It's set in an ancient, advanced West African civilization called Asiri. Interestingly, the people from this civilization colonized Mars at some point. So there's like a colonization angle to it. I felt like this first volume just introduces us to the world of Asiri and lets us know that there's something more sinister going on underneath the very flashy and advanced civilization. At some point, the people of Asiri probably colonized some beings on Mars, and basically these beings are trying to enact revenge. But then at the same time, there's also a coup that is brewing within the ranks of the elders in Asiri. But the drawings are epic. I really like the drawings, and I am intrigued enough to want to read the second volume. So I gave it 3.5 stars. The next book that I read is Dear Edward by Napolitano. I'm so glad I read this book. I gave this book 4.75 stars. So Dear Edward follows a 12-year-old boy that has just survived a plane crash of 192 passengers and pilots and crew members on board. Edward is the only one that survived the plane crash. So in the plane crash, he lost his brother and his parents, and so we basically just follow his life after the plane crash and how he's healing and navigating grief and survival guilt. This was such a brilliant book. There's also something interesting that Napolitano does with this book. Like, she alternates between the life that Edward is living after the crash, but also significant hours on the day that the crash happens. And we also get to see the lives of some of the other passengers on air. This book, I felt like, made me fall in love with Napolitano's writing. I appreciated her writing in Hello Beautiful, but this one made me fall in love. Last but not the least, I read Àànú by Lara Kareem. So this is a healing novel. It follows a character called Ino, like Ino Fire. That's such an interesting name. It follows a character called that has experienced some like personal setbacks in her life. So she caught her boyfriend cheating, and she has had a falling out with two of her best friends, and she retreats to a grandparents' village called Onilewa. I think that's how to pronounce it. So we basically follow Ino's journey of healing, and we also get to see some insights into her life before she decided to move to the village. I liked how deep in culture it is. It's very deep in Yoruba culture. I liked also how well the author describes the food. Like, there was this part where Ino was cooking gizdodo, and like there's a way that it was described. It wasn't described in a way that caters to like Yoruba people, but people that don't have context of culture would understand what she's trying to do still, but not in a way that the owners of the culture will feel like, why are you trying to explain things? I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say, but yeah, I gave this book 3.75 stars. I forgot that I had the book. So yeah, it's a really small book. It's healing. It's very like K-drama-esque. There's also some poetry at the back of the book. So yes, those are all of the books that I read in January. After I made my video where I ranted about like reading and talked about brain rot, I decided that in addition to reading books, I wanted to read more long form, like online content. That's kind of why I decided I wanted to read essays. And I enjoy reading essays, and so creative nonfiction writing is something I generally enjoy. So I decided to sign up to Substack. So the first essay that I read in January is actually one essay that I've had a link to since 2021. So this essay is titled Ewani Nigeria, and it is written by Danielle Kauteng. It is basically an interview with Tiwa Savage. She's, a popular Afrobeat Nigerian musician, and I found it interesting because this article was written in Yoruba, and I always want to read stuff in Yoruba. The first article that I read on Substack, which I think is the second essay that I read this year, is this one called It Is Okay to Be Curated. It is written by somebody called Jordan Santos. I like this essay because it validates, how online everyone is always saying, yeah, everything is fake online, blah, blah, blah. This essay makes an argument for why it is okay for everything to actually be well created. It's okay for that picture to be cropped. It's okay for this video to have been edited, because we are not supposed to know so much about each other anyway. Another essay that I read on Substack, because then I ended up reading most of my essays on Substack. The second one I read is The Cost of Convenience, The Lost Art of Relationship Cultivation by an account called Asata Unfiltered. So this essay was quite timely because around the time that I read it, I was navigating conflicting emotions. I was more than happy to do this thing because this person I love and this thing they needed. It was also an inconvenience for me, right? Like, not, oh, like I'm doing it grumbly, like, oh, I'm doing it with anger, but like, it's an inconvenience, right? And I did it because I love this person. So this essay was quite timely. Being willing to inconvenience yourself to offer help or support simply because of the value of said relationship is the cornerstone of humanity. I really enjoyed this essay. It was like I was being scolded and also validated at the same time. Another essay that I read is this one called Everyone's Eyes Are on Africa But Ours, also by Asata Unfiltered. So it's basically like a call to action for Africans to also be interested in what is happening across the continents, because all of these quote unquote superpowers are interested because they always want to exploit us anyway. So Ooh, another one I read is Everyone Wants to Be a Lit Girl and Same by an account called The Lit List. This one was a lot. So I generally also enjoy reading essays that examine the politics of reading. So this was one of those type of essays. When we don't understand a concept or the writing style leans too literary, we call the author pretentious, the writing stale. We are ignoring author's bad behavior or problematic views because we are reading to escape. So we are turned off when characters behave badly because we want our literature to uphold our personal utopias. So when I read this line, I felt scolded because of how angry I was at one of the characters in Hello Beautiful. It was like this particular essay was speaking to me. If a book does not explicitly spell out the moral of the story, or if the moral is presented through complicated and unlikable characters so that we must arrive at conclusions ourselves, we proclaim that book as no value. This is a brilliant essay. You need to read it. Another one that I read is Thought Daughters Have a Race Problem. This is pretty self-explanatory. You need to read this essay. This was probably the most thought-provoking essay I read this month, and it is titled In Defense of Pretension by Hansson. This essay went viral on Substack, by the way. Basically, this author is making a case for we need to start being pretentious. Like, we need to start shaming the shameless when it comes to reading. Poor people worship at the altar of knowledge. Nobody understands the value of knowing things more than a working class kid. The quiet part said loud, shouldn't you be worrying about more important things than affording to go to the theater, like applying for your benefits, like the pleb that you are? Money does shape this conversation, just not in the way that it is being presented. Capitalism has turned us into selfish, contradictory beings. Why do we see the internet grouse at fiction readers, pointing to self-help books by men in grey suits as the only reading that counts, this war being waged as specific victims in mind? This particular angle, I feel like it fits back into the rant that I had at the beginning of the year in one of my videos, because people are always talking about how the people that read over 100 books in a year, they're not really reading, they should be reading books that they learn from, blah, blah, blah. This point speaks directly to that. You should read this essay. Another one I read is Give Your Friends a Chance to Abandon You by Bits of Wonder. A lot of people think of vulnerability as sharing personal facts about yourself, but this is the easiest kind of vulnerability. Serious vulnerability is not just talking about how you were struggling at some point or that you were overwhelmed with emotion previously but are fine now. It's sharing these things as they are happening, expressing your anger and anxiety and sadness while you still haven't resolved them. There are very few people I can do this with, but it is something I want to do with more of my friends. I read a lot of essays this month. Another one I read this month is Stop Looking at Each Other. You are lonely because you are overconnected. Also, influencers are not your friends by Sherry Ning. This one is, I don't know, it's pretty self-explanatory. Another one I read is It's Really That Damn Phone, on Digital Anarchy, the Aesthetics of Revolution and How We Are Becoming Strangers by Àànú, I think it's Àànú. Last but not the least is What's Really Driving Muslim Women Away from Faith, on Feminism, Oppression and Male-Centered Islam by Warda Abbas. This was such a good end to my monthly reading of essays. If your iman isn't rooted in love for Allah, but instead in the performance of religion for men, the decentering of men in your life often feels like the decentering of Islam. I stopped and read it again, this time slowly and deliberately. It was profound, powerful, and mind-blowing. It confirmed what I had already known. My own journey had revealed this truth. When your faith is more about performing for men than loving Allah, ditching the patriarchy feels like ditching Islam altogether. Oh! I love this essay. In the spirit of essays and creative non-fiction writing, there's something I want to quickly share, and it is basically this new initiative called pfumo Collective. pfumo Collective is inviting African writers to submit proposals for creative non-fiction writing for the Citizen Project, which is an anthology that they intend to publish. They are going to then select 10 of these proposals, and then the writers of these proposals would work with a team of editors and mentors, including Ella Wakatama. And this project involves a workshop in Accra, Ghana, stipend for writing the piece that would result from the proposal, and travel expenses. And you get to be published in an anthology, the inaugural edition of this anthology. So if you are a creative non-fiction writer and you're looking to be published, or this is something that interests you, then I would say definitely submit your application. The submission deadline for the proposal, I believe, is February 14, if I am not mistaken. I would put a link to the website in my description box so you can also have a look and see what it is about. So finally, we have come to the end of this video. This video is going to be so long. But anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and let me know how many books you read in January. And if you've read any of these books or essays that I read in January, please let me know. Thank you again. I would see you in my next video. Bye bye.